WebSocket is a protocol that was developed for bidirectional web server-browser communication in real time. That is, a protocol is capable of sending and receiving data simultaneously over TCP connection. Typically, in a standard HTTP web request, the client opens the connection and requests data from the server. The server then processes the request and builds the response. And finally, the server sends the response back to the client. Now, you might have also heard about polling, which I have described in one of my system design videos. Polling is a standard technique used by the vast majority of AJAX applications. The basic idea is that the client repeatedly polls or requests a server for data. The client makes a request and waits for the server to respond with data. And if no data is available, an empty response is returned. Here is how the polling flow looks like. The client opens a connection and requests data from the server using the regular HTTP protocol. The server calculates the response and sends it back just like any regular HTTP traffic. The client then sends requests to the server at regular intervals. It could be every 1 second, every 5 seconds, every 10 seconds, or even in milliseconds. Now, the problem with polling is that the client has to keep asking the server for any new data. As a result, there are a lot of new connections being created and a lot of responses are empty, creating a lot of HTTP overhead. A variation of this traditional polling technique is HTTP long polling, which allows the server to push information to the client whenever their data is available. With long polling, the client requests information from the server exactly as in regular polling, but with the expectation that the server may not respond immediately. That's why this technique is sometimes referred to as hanging get. That is, if the server does not have any data available for the client, instead of sending an empty response, the server simply holds the request and waits until some data becomes available. And once the data becomes available, a complete response is sent to the client. Here is how the HTTP long polling flow looks like. The client first makes an initial request using regular HTTP and waits for a response. The server delays its response until it has an update and is available, or a timeout has occurred. When an update is available, the server sends a complete response to the client. The client typically sends a new long poll request either immediately upon receiving a response or after a pause to allow an acceptable latency period. Each long poll request has a timeout. Therefore, the client has to reconnect periodically after the connection is closed due to timeouts. Clearly, with HTTP requests, the client needs to send a request to the server, and once a response is received from the server, the connection is closed. Which means every client request creates a new connection and needs to wait for the full transaction between the server and client. Now, HTTP long polling does allow the server to send the data independently or push data to the client without the client making a request. However, each long poll request has a timeout. Therefore, the client has to reconnect periodically after the connection is closed due to timeouts. And so, long polling can be more resource intensive. WebSockets, on the other hand, can keep a unique connection open while eliminating the latency problems that arise with long polling. WebSocket is basically a full duplex asynchronous messaging that is supported so that both the client and the server can stream messages to each other independently. WebSocket protocol is capable of sending and receiving data simultaneously over TCP connection. Though WebSocket protocol was crafted for implementation across browser and servers, it can be also used in messaging apps such as WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. WebSocket typically works in 3 stages. A client establishes an appropriate WebSockets connection using a WebSocket handshake. If the respective server supports the protocol, it responds via the header to complete the handshake. And then a WebSocket connection replaces the handshake with same TCP connection. At this point, both parties can start sending data. Typically, when a WebSocket protocol is used, a WebSocket handler will be connected by the user. WebSocket handler is a lightweight server machine which keeps an open connection with all the active users. So, what are the applications of WebSockets? Well, WebSockets are heavily used in real-time web application to show the data at the client end, which is continuously being sent by the backend server. For example, in a stock trading website, for displaying the stock prices fluctuation and data which is continuously pushed by the backend server to the client. Chat applications use WebSockets to establish a long connection only once for exchange, publishing, and broadcasting of messages among the individual users or group of users. Chat applications reuse the same WebSocket connection for sending and receiving the message. Gaming applications are another place where WebSockets are heavily used because they too require the UI gets automatically refreshed without even establishing a new connection. However, WebSockets will be an overkill if we want to fetch old data, or we want to get the data only once to process it. Data which is not required very frequently or fetched only once can be queried by the simple HTTP request. So in this scenario, it is better not to use WebSocket but go with HTTP protocol.